Welcome to another Mother Runner, your best running friend in podcast form. We do all the talking, even on the uphills. I'm your host, Sarah Bowen Shea, with Coach Liz Waterstraat in the co-host seat. Hello, Liz.
Hi, Sarah.
So I feel like we were so close there last week. I drove past the exit for Naperville on my epic drive from Wichita, Kansas to Clifton, New Jersey with my 21-year-old son, John.
Wow. Were you on? Trying to think what you were on. 88, maybe?
I think we just took I-90 to I-80. I don't know, but because then we were headed to Park Ridge, Illinois to stay with my best friend from college.
Yeah.
And John saw one of his best friends from his college who lives in Chicago with her mother. So he then went into Chicago to see her, spend the day with her. Yes. Yes. And it was so funny, like driving, there'd be these exits. And I was like, oh, Kate Walton lives off of that exit. And, this person lives off of this exit. And all these Bammers that I was just like, it was like Tour de Bammer. So it was a 25 and a half hour drive total, split up over 2 days. And I drove for 20 of those hours. Yeah. The first day, John slept for the first 5 hours of the ride.
Like a good child should.
Yes, right. Should I put him in a car seat and then had a little mirror behind him so I could make sure he was still alive?
Yeah.
So it's because he had, let's see, how many shows? I guess 7 performances of Fiddler on the Roof at MT Wichita over the course of 5 days. Mm-hmm. And then he had gone out because he was leaving. He had gone out with his friends and he was out until a little bit before 4:00. And I got to the house where he was staying for the summer. I got there at 6:50 in the morning. Wow. He had texted me as he was going to bed. He said, "I'm just now going to bed. Please bear with me in the morning, Mom." So I can be a bit high energy in the morning, very early in the morning. And so I toned it down. I reined it in. And I got there and he had packed everything and it was all just sitting there. He was still in bed, but I just said, okay, I'm going to start carrying it out to the car. And so just started making trips back and forth. And at one point he leaned over and whispered in my ear, "You are so awesome, Mom." Mm-hmm. I was like, "Oh,
that's sweet."
Yeah. So we had a good time. We had a very good time. My thing is I just can't stand sitting for that long, Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a long time. How's your booty?
Yeah. His car is incredibly comfortable. It's kind of crazy. Drives a Honda Civic hybrid. And and I had cruise control set the whole time, so I was able to move my legs. But yeah, there would be times that I'm just like, okay, we just got to stop so I can stand up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Took a few little walks when we would get out at modern rest stops. We learned the difference between a modern rest stop and a rest stop. Rest stop is literally all you can do at it is rest. There's no facilities. So I'm glad to have that in my rear view mirror.
Yeah.
What's the longest road trip you've ever done with your kids?
Oh, the kids we did during the pandemic, we went out to South Carolina. So about 12 hours of driving. And I remember we used our minivan. We cleared out all the seats in the back. So this is not okay. This is don't call Officer Friendly on me about this. But we had just like stuff for them to do back there. And maybe we did keep the seats in. I don't want to like incriminate myself on that one, but yeah. And they were fine. I mean, I think my husband was more the annoyed one because I was like, listen, we can do this in one day. And I hate to drive. So he did the driving and I just
He drove the whole way?
Oh yeah. And on the way back, I made him do it in one day. On the way out, we took 2 days. We stopped somewhere in Tennessee, beautiful country out there. Uh-huh. But on the way back, I was like, oh no, we're going all the way. He was not happy with me.
The funny thing is then we arrived Wednesday night. What our tradition now is after a long drive like that, we drive straight to our favorite ramen place in the town where he goes to school. And we got there half an hour before it closed. And So then the next night we took the nonstop flight from Newark back to Portland, and we were like, oh my gosh, it's going to seem like the world's shortest flight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, oh no, we had to, sit on the tarmac for 2 hours in the hottest airplane possible. It
Oh,
was just fighting panic attack the entire time.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's terrible.
Yeah. And, but they let us stand up, and I was one of the few passengers who stood up. I'm like, people, why are you sitting now? We're going to have to sit for almost 6 hours after this. So, so
Says the woman who just sat for 25 hours.
right, right. But at least we have the option to stand on the
Yeah.
airplane. So it was really nice to have John there, because I have had a very similar delay going out of Newark without John there, and I really had to do some, internal monologues with myself to not freak out.
Wait, so what did you do? Like cling to him, or like how did he help this situation here?
Just knowing he was there was important. We were seated behind each other. We were exit row windows. He was right in front of me. And so every once in a while we'd look at each other, give each other a smile, or sometimes he'd reach out and we'd squeeze hands. So, I don't know, just knowing he was there, it was okay.
Yeah.
So we got home we landed at 1:30 in the morning from that flight. So it was an epic adventure, but it's behind us now. So yeah. So, all right. Well, we have an extra special episode. It's a crossover episode with the Marathon Training Academy podcast, serving up expert advice for your first marathon, from how to pace yourself so you reach the finish line with a smile on your face, or maybe at least not a grimace, to coachly advice on training. Our guests are Angie and Trevor Spencer, the founders of Marathon Training Academy. This husband-wife duo live in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and they are the parents of 3 sons. This episode is long overdue. Props to Trevor for reaching out and suggesting it. Welcome, Angie and Trevor.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, we've been wanting to chat with you guys for a long time, so I'm glad this is finally working out.
Yeah, exactly.
How about we start with you both telling us a little bit about your respective running backgrounds?
Well, I ran a little bit in high school and college in my 20s, but it really wasn't something that was a thing. I didn't really train or anything. And then our family moved across the country in 2007. I didn't really know anyone in the new area where we moved. I had 2 little kids at home. I was kind of having like a crisis of sorts, just thinking like, what am I going to, how am I going to fit into this new area? And just by chance, I signed up for a 5K in our area and really enjoyed it. And I didn't really know that I would enjoy, pushing myself when it came to running. And so I quickly signed up for another one and enjoyed that as well, and was talking to someone at the race, as you do. And he was doing 10K, and I was like, whoa, like mind blown. There's someone who does this twice. So it was kind of one of those experiences where my mind expanded. Uh-huh. And at that point, I had just started subscribing to Runner's World magazine, and I decided, this marathon stuff sounds really exciting. So pretty much totally unprepared, I signed up for a marathon. I decided to train for that. At the time, I didn't have any friends who were runners. I didn't know anyone who had ever done a marathon. So it seemed like a really, really big challenge for me. And so I did a lot of things the wrong way, learned some hard lessons in training, but I was able to complete that first marathon in the spring of 2008. And I knew after crossing that finish line that it was only going to be the first of many. So that was kind of how I got started.
Wow. Okay, and Trevor, how about you?
I hated running, so I was watching her do this, and I was happy to support her. But I had an idea to start a podcast that maybe we could do it as a side hustle. And so in my market research, I came across marathon training, and Angie had run a couple marathons. I'm like, let's start a podcast about marathon training. So then she said,
as one does.
Yeah. She said, explain what a podcast is. I mean, it was pretty new back then. This was like probably 2009 when we're having this conversation. But the deal was that I had to start running. So she wrote a basically couch to 5K plan for me. And it was hard for me to even run 1 minute without stopping.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't like greatly out of shape. I was just kind of lazy, and I like more team sports. Running was always miserable, and it was always punishment for team sports. But eventually I got to where I could run 1 minute without stopping. And then Angie said, all right, now try to do 3. Eventually worked my way up to being able to run a mile without stopping. And then I did a 5K and half marathon and marathon. And now I think I've done 25 marathons. So not nearly as many as Angie and probably some listeners here in the audience. But yeah, you never know what'll happen when you just start something new like that. Even if you think you hate it, you can learn to like it, maybe even love it.
Okay, so that's kind of crazy that you were not a runner or into running when you founded Marathon Training Academy. So I find it funny that you all kicked off MTA the same year that Dimity and I started Another Mother Runner, which is 2010. There must have been something in the ether that time. So tell us a little bit about how you kicked that off.
We actually started with the podcast. We had no idea if we would get an audience, who would be out there, who would listen. But right from the beginning, people were just hungry for content specific to the marathon. And I think before that, there wasn't as much competition in podcasting, frankly, right? There's a lot of great shows now. So I think we're able to rank pretty high in the algorithm on Apple Podcasts. I think this was before Spotify, just with those keywords, marathon training. And people started finding value with the show, emailing us, leaving comments, and we just saw right from the beginning how positive and how cool the running community is, and just this great energy. So it's thanks to our amazing listeners that we've been able to do it this long, right? I mean, podcasting for since 2010, like you guys have, it's not easy. It takes a lot of work. People think that they're going to get rich podcasting or whatever, and you just
hasn't panned out for us yet. So, but I enjoy the heck out of it.
Oh yeah.
And the funny thing was, when we got started, I was pregnant with our third son. So running had taken a bit of a backseat for me at that point in time. But we were just in our dining room with, a very rudimentary mic that we both shared, and nervously doing interviews with people, that we admired, and were amazed that we could even get our foot in the door to talk to some of these people. So it was pretty amazing. And our dynamic was between Trevor and I was a bit different too, because I was more of like the type A runner who's going to follow the training plan and, is a little more driven towards my running goals. And Trevor was more of like, the laid back runner who was kind of just getting started in his journey. So I think a lot of different people kind of resonated with that, because there was people who related to me, and there was people who obviously related to Trevor. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
People think it's I was just going to pigtail on that one.
Go ahead.
People think it's a shtick that I have this lazy persona on mic, but no, I am really that lazy in real life. So it's not a shtick. It is still hard for me to motivate myself to go out and run, even to this day, but somehow I manage.
So Angie, Trevor already alluded to that you were his coach, and I would imagine at some point along this journey, you became a certified running coach. So tell us a little more about how you got into coaching.
Yeah, that's a great question. As you can imagine, once we started hearing from people who were listening to the podcast and finding value, I was like, wow, I really need to make sure I know what I'm talking about. I don't want to be misleading people, giving them bad advice. And my sister at the time was also training for her first marathon. So it kind of gave me that added incentive. And as someone, I really like to, kind of get granular with things and make sure that I know what I'm talking about. So I went through the Roadrunners Club of America level 1 training at that point in time, and started taking on a few coaching clients. And then eventually I did level 2 with RRCA and did my USA track and field level 1 certification. So, kind of one thing leads to another. And I've done like a perimenopause and menopause certification as well, just responding to my own interest as my own body has been changing, and a lot of people in our audience as well. So yeah, it's been interesting. And I would say loosely that I did coach Trevor a bit. He did not really listen to me very much, but
I probably did. I probably did half of the training plan she gave me. But I finished the first marathon, having been a total non-runner, not that long beforehand. I finished it in, I think, 4:34. So I didn't beat Oprah's time, but I did okay, I guess, for my first marathon.
Although he thought about locking himself in a porta pot to get away from me because I was going to pace him, and we had this prearranged strategy of, run and walk through aid stations. And then as the miles crept on, obviously he was feeling like walking a lot more and he wasn't appreciating my encouragement. So he thought about any way he could get away from me. So at that time we decided I don't think it's good for our marriage that we actually run together. So.
She's too fast.
Things are bad when you want to lock yourself in a race porta potty. Okay, so Angie, I have to ask, you finished your first marathon in 4:10 and you've gone on to run more than 70 marathons. Amazing. Congratulations. With a PR of just under 3:20, or maybe you've bettered it since what's written on your website. But so while not everyone who runs 26.2 miles is aiming for a faster time, for those who are, you got to share a few quick insider tips on how you cut more than 50 minutes off your marathon finish time. That's, nearly 2 minutes per mile.
Yeah, that is a great question. I think a lot of people, at some point think maybe how can I get faster? And at first, I just was happy to run 4:10. I didn't have any idea of what marathon times, were. And then for my second marathon, after I had recovered from an injury brought on by training for my first marathon, I wanted to break 4 hours. And so trained smarter at that time, broke 4 hours, super excited about that, and I'm just having fun signing up for races and talking to people at races. And then I think it was my fourth marathon. I was running the Wineglass Marathon in New York State, which is a great one. And I was running with this lady and she was like, if I stay on this pace, I'm going to qualify for the Boston Marathon. And I'm like, what's the Boston Marathon? I was so new to it and everything. And, she was explaining and she was in the age group. I think she was 5 years older than me. So she was in an age group. And so I realized, she finished, we celebrated together. It was amazing. And I realized at that point in time, I'd run a 3:45. I'm like, wow, if I took I think it was 5 minutes at that time, maybe it was 10 off my time, I could qualify for Boston. So it was kind of became that incremental goal, could I qualify for Boston? That became the big question. And it kind of stirred a deep curiosity in me, how much can I push myself? And I will say that my journey was slower than some. And so I think one of the things is be prepared just to be very consistent. Mm-hmm. And that's, not a very fun answer because it's something that takes time and work. And for different people, it's going to, the journey to getting faster may take different avenues. But for me, I didn't qualify for Boston until my 25th marathon. So, it took a while. And there were times that I came within a few seconds. And then there was the time when they took away the 59-second buffer.
Yes.
I was like, ah. And then, they tightened it up 5 minutes. And it just kind of felt like this elusive goal that was
right.
getting away from me. But I just kind of had this inner desire and drive to continue chasing that. And so, I did eventually qualify for Boston and, and went through different phases of my life, my running life, honestly. Sometimes I, wasn't pursuing times. Sometimes I was pursuing training for an ultra marathon or, trail running or just some different things. But I think there was always that desire deep down to see what I had in myself. And it was kind of interesting because my PR came at the end. I think I did 4 marathons in the fall of 2019 because I was working on my 50 state goal. I was trying to run a marathon in all 50 states and I was getting close and I knew that I wanted Hawaii to be my last one because that seemed like a great way to celebrate, So I had 4 states to go in the fall of 2019. And so I did quite a few marathons that fall and I ended up breaking 3:30 for the first time at Hartford Marathon, which was amazing. And then for my 50th state, we were in Hawaii and it was one of the Revel races. So I will say it was a downhill marathon, which, if you train for it correctly, can give you a significant time advantage. And that was when I ran 3:19:58, I think, at that race. And so it just kind of felt like serendipity. It wasn't necessarily like I was trying to, hit that time, but I was just trying to see what I could get out of myself.
Wow.
So yeah, I would say consistency, listening to your body. There was times I had to like rehab injuries during that journey of going from 410 to 320, sub 320. And I ran some really slow marathons in there too. So you just have to be in it for the long haul, I guess.
Mm.
And I think one thing that gets people is they kind of get this like timeline in their head, and it's easy to do. We think like, oh, I have this goal, I want to accomplish it by next year, and that's great. Some people will accomplish it within their timeline, and some people don't. And I think being patient and really doing what's best for your body and your schedule, making running something that serves you and not you serving running is a really important balance. And so for me, it just took longer. But I think that consistency is really important. I think fueling is super important. I didn't realize that partway through my journey, like, a fed runner is a fast runner. And, I was under fueling, was, not taking enough carbohydrates, not taking enough protein, all of that. And so I think as you go along, you start to learn these things. And if you keep educating yourself, listening to great podcasts like AMR and, the different ones out there, you can really pick up a lot of great things. So that was, part of my journey. So I would say consistency, strength training is huge, and fueling and your nutrition would be like my top 3 things, I guess, if I had to boil it down.
Okay. All right. So let's dive into the topic specifically. So over the last 16 years, you must have talked with countless first-time marathoners and wannabe marathoners. So when a runner approaches you saying they're contemplating doing a marathon for the first time, but they're not sure they're ready for the challenge, what do you tell them?
I think the first thing is I like to find out their why. What is their motivation behind wanting to run a marathon? And if they can really like get granular and dive into their why, that's going to really help them in this process, like processing whether this is the right timing to run a marathon or, there's some whys that are going to help you go the distance while others may not. And so let's say, for example, like the desire to lose weight is not a great reason to run a marathon, because many people find they have, the opposite happen because you're hungry or you're eating more, and so that can be very discouraging. You get in your marathon training and you find that you're not losing weight like you thought you might, then you're going to get super discouraged and, maybe quit. So, it has to be a deeper why of, achieving some goal. It can't be because like your best friend wants to run a marathon and she's pressured you into running it. I mean, some people do that and it's fine, but often it doesn't turn out that great. So I find that the more personal the reason, the more you can really get curious about your reasons for running a marathon. That's going to help you go the distance and have a better experience with it. And then, the second thing would be, do you have the running base to start marathon training? Because if you go into it, try to do too much too soon, you're probably going to get injured. It's going to be discouraging. It's going to be more painful than it has to be. And so I think, seeing if the person's in a place where taking on marathon training is a good fit for them. They should be injury free. Not dealing with any like really serious chronic health conditions, unless it's carefully managed with a healthcare professional and, they have the go ahead. And then, I would say like, is it the right timing for you? Because it does take a significant amount of time to train for a marathon, especially that long run chunk. And so I really believe that running should be something that adds to your life and doesn't take away from it. So evaluating like, is it the time to take on this adventure? Because, training for a marathon is another stress, and it can be a very positive stress, but your body doesn't really understand that it's a good thing that you want to do. It's just seeing like, I've got work stress, I've got parenting stress, and I've got this marathon stress. And so you really have to evaluate if it's the right time for you. So those are some of the things that I would have people get curious about. And I feel like if they can answer those questions, then they're going to have a better training experience and probably a better overall marathon experience.
So often with
Yeah.
a first-time marathoner, they'll look at a training plan and they'll be intimidated by the mileage, especially looking ahead to that inevitable 20-mile training run. So what do you tell those folks to calm their distance-related anxiety?
Yeah, that is important to think about. And having anxiety is honestly part of the process. And I like to tell people that not all anxiety is bad anxiety. Like anxiety just shows that you care and that you want to do a good job and that you're excited about it. So I think, if they have specific anxieties, let's dive into those. Like, what specifically are you anxious about? Because I feel like, of course, the 20-miler is going to be intimidating for everyone. Like, I remember training for my first marathon being super intimidated by it. And I feel like there is always that question in our heads, like, can I go the distance? And I think that's true whatever distance that you're stretching towards. It could be the 10K if have been running 5Ks. Like, that's a significant stretch there. And so, yeah, I would say, kind of diving into some of those anxieties, seeing where they're coming from, and then realizing that marathon training just takes a lot of faith. You have to have faith that if you go through the process of building that strong running base, of doing the training runs, of recovering well, of, eating to fuel and nourish your body, then your body is going to respond to that. And you're, for the most part, if you don't get injured, you're going to be able to do those 20-mile long runs. So, I think there is no way to say like 100%, yes, if you follow the training plan, everything's going to go well, because I think that is one of the things that keeps the marathon as one of those big goals and keeps it exciting for people. There is that question mark of, will my training go well? Can I go the distance? And I think if that was just a given, like, of course you can, then there some of the appeal, some of the mystique of the marathon wouldn't be there, if that makes sense.
What's interesting is we actually see more people have a different kind of anxiety. They're nervous about the training plan having less days of running per week or less mileage per week than they want. Or they have a real, serious time goal in their mind for their first marathon. It might not be realistic. And we just try to hey, let's focus on getting to the finish line strong. Let's focus on injury prevention, kind of pull them back a little bit, because they're super ambitious, super driven, motivated, and we don't want them to get injured or get some kind of overtraining, overuse injury. So, I think we see more anxiety around cutting back miles than adding miles.
Interesting. All right, let's take a brief break to learn about the brands that support this content. We'll be back in a flash.
So what about, with a lot of marathon training, it's really rather boring because it's that foundational work. That's just zone 1, zone 2, as many will call it. What do you think about that? And how do you feel like that ties into marathon success?
Yeah, it's super important to really build your endurance base. And I feel like one mistake that many newer runners make, and they even carry into marathon training, is thinking that they have to, be giving it their all during every single run. And, sometimes our running watches, our devices kind of play into that, because, they give you better scores if your heart rate is higher. And if you're, out there, feel like you're going further and doing more. And so I feel like sometimes there's a feedback loop of people just wanting to really hit it hard. But like you said, the bread and butter of marathon training, any endurance training, is going to be more your zone 2 running. So, if kind of the 80-20 rule, like 80% of your training should be more in an easy heart rate zone. And then that allows you to recover well so that you can hit it hard for that 20%, where you're going to be aiming for specific times and really challenging your body, maybe intervals or speed work. But it is challenging to pull yourself back. And I think that is one big frustration many people have is how do I slow down? How do I keep from being competitive with myself or competitive with someone they're following on social media? Because I think a lot of people have like a time in their head that they kind of, even if they say, they don't care what their first marathon time is, they probably maybe have a time that they're secretly going for. Or maybe they ran back in high school or when they were younger and they have like a pace. They kind of think like they should still be running. Well, all that should go out the window, especially during marathon training. And it's, it can be challenging because I've fallen into that trap of like, oh, run harder. You're going to have better results. And that's not necessarily the case, because you can only, do more when you can recover well. And part of recovering well is, not doing more than your body is ready for. And your heart rate is going to be one big indicator of what your body is ready for. And things like your heart rate variability. I actually heard recently that the Japanese have a term called Nico running, and it means running with a smile. And so it kind of comes into that conversational pace, that zone 2 running, where you should be able to, say a few words, have a short conversation if you were running with somebody, or be able to run with kind of a relaxed smile on your face, not like I'm hanging on for dear life, gritted teeth smile, but, run with a smile. And so, yeah, it's a challenge because, many of us just like to always be making progress. But in order to make progress, you do have to slow down to get faster.
It's a great paradox.
Yeah.
Slow down to get faster.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to take walk breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously.
Yeah. So every time I've trained for a marathon, I struggle with the push-pull of loving having a clear-cut workout or, a prescribed rest day every day with wanting to do other sporty activities I love, like swimming or playing pickleball. So, how much room do you see someone having when they train for a marathon, especially their first one, room to do those other activities they like?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I feel like people think that marathon training is going to be like 6 days a week of running. And honestly, when I have most people who are training for their first marathon, I prefer they only run 4 days a week. I would rather see quality over quantity runs. Now, there's different situations. If someone was a competitive, like half marathon runner, then they're used to running more days. But for most people, I would rather see them run less, but them be very specific workouts and have time to get in the strength training, the injury prevention work, and have fun as well, with other hobbies and activities. Now, as you get into those bigger weeks of marathon training where you have the longer runs, it's probably honestly going to take up more of your weekend. So you may not have time for 18 holes of golf. If you have a lot of other responsibilities that you're juggling. So there is some sacrifice that is required, but I do think people respond better and have a better experience marathon training when they are not cutting out every single thing besides running. So it's important to be focused, but not too focused. You still need to have fun. You still need to be able to go play pickleball if you want. Trevor's a good example of this. Even though he doesn't necessarily follow his training plans well, he integrates a lot of fun activities, other sports in, and, kind of his ADD brain likes to be doing a lot of other things. And it does contribute to his overall fitness.
I like to be mediocre at a lot of sports. Yeah, I've been recently doing martial arts, but Angie, something that I've heard you tell clients is try to avoid high impact activity, like high impact sports, if you're training for your first marathon, because of the risk of injury, right?
Yeah, I really encourage people to keep their easy days easy and their hard days hard. So if we're, like on a easier or, maybe the rest day, like don't go out and play like a competitive game of basketball, because that is not really following the spirit of the rest day. If you want to take an easy bike ride, walk your dog, whatever, that's going to be great. Movement is medicine, but you don't necessarily want to be hitting it hard every single day. So kind of evaluating how you're recovering. And if your, sport of choice is very challenging, it's going to require a lot out of your body. There's going to be that balance that you have to really think about your priorities. And that's where having a running coach honestly comes in really well. And I'm sure Liz works with a lot of multi-sport athletes who are trying to balance a lot of things. And so, it can really help to have a coach in your corner to help you balance that and be that voice of reason, saying like, this is going to help you, but I see this pattern and maybe this is not contributing well to your recovery. So yeah, I'm, a huge proponent of having a running coach who really knows you well and can help you weigh some of those things so that you can have the highest quality of life possible during marathon training, but also not push yourself over into injury, overtraining, or just getting burnt out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, what about fueling? I know fueling is so tricky and it's individual, and you're not a registered dietitian, but what are some of the what are some of the best practices that you share regarding fueling?
I like to encourage people to kind of do an audit of their fueling. And if fueling has been an issue for them in the past, it is really important to work with a dietitian, a sports dietitian, because they're going to be able to give you very specific advice. If you've had any kind of like REDs in the past or, issues with disordered eating, it's going to be very important that you get really specialized help. But I would say for most people, you're going to want to not do most of your training in a fasted state because that is going to cause just more stress to your body. I would say, especially to women, it can really throw off, your hormones and not be a great thing. And women often typically underfuel as well surrounding their workouts. So I would say eating something first thing in the morning before you do your workout, and then, your intra run fueling, what you're taking in as you're running is very important. I would say start fueling earlier than you think you need to, because a lot of people think like, oh, I'll take something at 3 to 4 miles. Well, if you've already dug yourself into a little bit of a fueling deficit at that point, it's going to be really hard to play catch up and get out of it. And you're going to just, it's going to really suck, honestly. Your blood sugar drops. It's like your brain is not processing things as well. Your legs are feeling heavy. So I would say, really practice during your marathon training from the very first week, your fueling strategy. And, fuel that you don't take in can't help you. So, obviously you have to sometimes work around a tricky stomach, and that can be challenging for people finding the right fueling products and the right timing, the right hydration, all of that. But start early in your marathon training. And I would say, err on the side of taking in more rather than less.
Awesome. Well, it's time for another quick break. We'll shift to talking about race day when we return. Okay, it's marathon day. In the Marathon Training Academy Instagram feed, you have a funny meme of a sprightly marching band guy high-stepping down the football field with a caption, "How everyone feels in the first mile of a marathon." So please share some pacing tactics for marathoners of all speeds.
I'm glad you got that joke. I was wondering how many people would understand what I was trying to say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we everyone's probably done this. You just go out too fast, whether it's a 5K or a marathon, because you're excited. You're like, I feel great. I'm going to feel this good the whole time. It just doesn't happen. But I'll kick it over to Coach Angie to explain.
Yeah, like Trevor said, it is a very common mistake. I have made it before. I've ran plenty of marathon with a positive split. And so, everyone here is like, start out conservatively. And it's hard to know like what is a conservative pace. And so you will get an idea of what a conservative pace is through your training, through your long runs. And so making sure that you're not doing the first mile, your heart rate is not spiking up, you're not running faster than you've run in training on your long runs. And for different people, maybe they'll have a specific pace that they've found during training or that their coach has given them to aim for a certain window or a certain heart rate zone to try to stay in. But, if you find yourself like kind of like having sort of like road rage in the first few miles of a marathon, that probably means you're going too fast. If you're like, why are all these people, moving so slow in front of me, like trying to like, jump on the sidewalk and get around people and like just having that really tightness in your chest, that anxiety, I would say that's a good sign that you're going too fast. And sometimes it's just experience. Like we can tell people this, and sometimes they just have to go out there and blow up. And, honestly, I never like to see when that happens, but sometimes we learn more from failure than we do from, other people's examples. And so, I would say that start out slower than you think you need to start. Make sure that your heart rate is not climbing to those higher zones, especially in the first half marathon, because you still have another half to go. And, we've all had that experience for the most part of feeling like we were handed a piano sometime between miles 18 and 22. And, simply we just expended too much energy or we're not fueling well enough during the race. And so, kind of figure out during your training what is a reasonable pace to start out with, and kind of even, some people like have pace goals that they write on their arm, or there's great pace bands that you can get, those pace tattoos, something to try to keep you on track, to override that part of your brain that's just like, out of the gates, let's go. Because, it's excitement, and we've all experienced it. So.
Mm-hmm.
So, looking back to all of the conversations you've had in the last 16 years, what do you hear surprises runners the most about undertaking 26.2 miles for the first time?
When they finish or when they begin?
Just in
Yeah,
general. I mean,
yeah,
during the
either.
race. Hmm.
Hmm. I think what surprises them is when they show up to a marathon and they think they're going to be surrounded by people who are extremely fit and fast looking, and they show up and there's like just everyday looking folk, old, young, all types of bodies. And then they get passed by someone who's probably 20 years older than them or 30. And it's like, wow, people are capable of so much more than we can even fathom. And you find that out about yourself, but you also find that out about the community, the running community. So I think that's one thing I would go with.
Yeah, for sure. You can't judge a runner by how they look. And that's a great, philosophy for life in general as well. But I think another thing that comes to mind is people underestimate how transformative the process of training for a marathon is, and actually sometimes how emotional they are on race day.
Hmm.
Um, and I think a lot of people, when they actually look back at the whole experience, they realize it was more about the journey than the destination. So, it became about more than just crossing that finish line and getting the medal. It was about like everything they learned along the way, the people that they met, the fears they had to confront within themselves, just the experiences they had. I think like Bart Yasso says, you never know where running will take you. And it is really about the journey, just like life is. We often have these like goals, these end goals, but it often, when we look back, we think, wow, it was not necessarily the crossing of the finish line that stands out in my mind, but it was something that they learned and they took away from the journey. And so that's, one of the reasons that our tagline is you can run a marathon and change your life, because it can be very transformative.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And that you have what it takes.
That's right.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So, what do you believe are the 2 or 3 most important things a first time marathoner can do during the race to ensure a positive experience for themselves out there on the course?
I think it comes down to, of course, your pacing, like we've talked about a little bit, not starting out too fast, having a realistic pace goals for the marathon. Fueling is huge. Having practiced your fueling and followed your fueling plan to the best of your ability. And then I would say having tested out your gear ahead of time. We've all got like the horrendous chafing from our sports bra that we hadn't actually run, more than 10 miles in and didn't realize we'd be left with a bloody wound. So, like those kind of things, like knowing where you need to apply the anti-chafe ointment. And, if the shorts like ride up and you're yanking them down the whole time and just super annoyed by that, or if your fuel belt is like bouncing uncontrollably, there's like those little things that can sometimes really be annoying. So I would
Oh,
say
yeah.
practice, all your gear, make sure that your shoes are not tied too tightly. Like all the things that, that you can practice ahead of time is going to give you more confidence and a better experience on race day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard of runners finishing their marathon and they were just so disgusted with themselves for being slower than they thought they would be that they threw their medal away and, stormed off. I'm like,
Oh.
something that I've heard our coaches say over and over to our clients and our people that we work with is go into it having layered goals too. Like you
Mhm.
have a time goal, but maybe your B goal will be a little bit slower. You can have all the way down to like a C or D goal.
Mhm.
And the very base level goal can be just finish,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
have fun. So
Mhm.
that way you're going to get something positive out of your experience at the race. Even if you don't hit your A goal, you're still going to
Mhm.
walk away with an accomplishment.
Mhm. For sure. Yes. Awesome. All right. Well, Angie and Trevor, thanks so much for joining us. And as you said, it was long overdue. So I'm glad that we did this.
Thanks so much for having us. It was great to talk with you both.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And congrats on all the success of AMR and the books and the podcast. And we've been admirers from afar. So
Oh,
keep
you're
up the
very
great work.
sweet. Goes both ways. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. This podcast is a production of Another Mother Runner and Feisty Media. I hope you're planning to join Coach Liz and me at Feisty Fest, our 3-day multi-sport and health festival this September. The lineup of experts leading learning sessions and panels is incredible. In addition to the array of sporty activities happening, I know I'm really excited to take part in your swim clinic, Coach Liz.
Yes.
So for all the details, go to livefeisty.com. That's LIVEFEISTY.com.